Yeah, and so now I would like to introduce David Landini, the bloke that we met up here at the farmers' protest about the water in Deniliquin, 21st of November 2023. So we've done a number of interviews today of the people up here, and now David has a very, very interesting story. And I've known David for like 20 odd years, I reckon.
A number of years now, Wade.
Yep. And so David is on about something that's totally different to most other people are on about. So David's talking about creating himself a separate state in Australia. And if we step back for a second, David's new idea is the Riverina State. So we might throw to him now and just let him explain briefly of what that's about so people can get an idea at the start of this. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wade. And just a couple of things, or one thing I'll pick up on, it's actually not my idea, and it's not a new idea either. The first time that the Riverina State, or actually they were colonies back then, was back in 1863. So the Riverina attempted to separate from New South Wales in 1863, right through till about 1865. And of course Australia back then was all New South Wales. And a bit of Australian history that a lot of people don't know is that all of Australia was New South Wales to the West Australian border. And I'll just go through a few dates here, but Tasmania separated from New South Wales in 1825. South Australia separated from New South Wales as a colony in 1846. Victoria separated from New South Wales as a colony in 1851. And strangely enough, gold was discovered the day after Victoria separated from New South Wales.
What are the chances?
I'd say there's a fair bit of insider trading there.
Yep.
And Queensland separated from New South Wales in 1859. And the Riverina attempted to separate in 1863. So it's not a new idea. It's a very, very old idea.
Yep.
And the reasons have always been, I believe, much the same. If you read through the history books and the petitions back from 1863, you read the problems and the things that they discuss there, you find that these things are very, very similar now. We have a state of New South Wales where over 3/4 of the population is in Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. We have a very relatively sparsely populated area west of the Great Dividing Range. Not very Sydney or Newcastle orientated at all. Most of our business goes down through, most of our exports are through Victoria, through Melbourne or Geelong.
Yep.
Most of our early pioneers, not all, but most of our early pioneers came up through the goldfields or via Victoria. And so culturally, economically and financially, we're actually very, very tied to Victoria. And culturally, we're very, very tied to Victoria, and even genealogically, we're very, very tied to Victoria, much more so than to New South Wales. So the thing is, it's not actually a new idea, but the reason is the state is dominated by the population, the urban population of Newcastle, Sydney, and Wollongong, and that urban population has a very different cultural mindset, a very different professional mindset. The inland of New South Wales is really an agricultural economy. Yep. And all businesses, all production is really based on agriculture. There are other other goods produced, but agriculture is a massive producer. And the economy is really based on agricultural production.
Yep.
Whereas in the urban areas, not so much at all. But the problem we have is that the urban areas, because of that domination of the state simply by the population that they've got, and also the politicians that they've got, because we have elections based on equal population, and over 3/4 of the politicians in New South Wales are from Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. And they make legislation for us that's not so good. And we can elect a member of parliament if we like, which we do, and we can send that member of parliament to the New South Wales Parliament and represent us. But when it comes to a vote, we simply do not have the numbers. And the legislation that's formed in New South Wales, and Victoria is the same, it's just a different state. Victoria is exactly the same problem.
And that even goes down to your local government, the whole deal. Like, I know people who've got on council that tried to fix things, but if they don't have the numbers, then it's pointless.
Absolutely. You've got to have the numbers. Politics is numbers. If you've got the numbers, you will win, and if you haven't got the numbers, you will lose. So in New South Wales, the population is over there, and Victoria's the same. You can just say Geelong, Melbourne, and the Mornington Peninsula, or Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, just a different state.
Exactly, yes.
So that's not necessarily bad, but within that urban population, there is a very, very large fraction that votes, that has an attitude, a very anti-agricultural production attitude, and it's
getting worse.
And it's getting worse, and it's personified or measured by the number of people who vote for parties such as the Greens. Now, I'm not picking on the Greens as a party. It's not personal in any way. It's just politics. But there's a lot of people who vote for parties such as the Greens and such as another party in New South Wales called the Sustainable Australia Party. Now, you don't have them in Victoria, but they used to be called the Sustainable Population Party, which indicates what they're on about. And if you look at their website, you'll see they're actually worse than the Greens as far as
wanting to control Australia's population and wipe people out and get rid of them, the whole deal.
They're worse than the Greens.
Yep.
So, but in New South Wales, in the last state election, 556,000 people voted for the Greens and the Sustainable Australia Party. 556,000, number one in the Legislative Assembly in the state election. That's more people vote for the Greens in New South Wales than every single voter in the 9 electorates west of the Great Dividing Range, plus Monero, plus Bega on the coast. So you've got the Great Dividing Range and then the southern portion of the state as well. Every single voter there only comes to, I think it's 545,000 voters. There's more people who vote for the Greens and parties opposed to the things that make our livelihoods are based on, than the total number of voters.
And I think, David, too, the big problem with that is so many of these people who may appear to have good intent, they may believe that they're doing a good job, they may believe that farmers are destroying the environment and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, when you actually talk to some of these people, once you get through some of the hysteria and the aggression, and you actually start talking about dot points, a lot of these people will turn around and go, well, look, I didn't really know that. They don't seem to connect the fact that you need to be able to eat food and grow food. And if you kill off all your farmers, where's that going to come from? So I can certainly see the point that you're making, and the logic is there. So you've been doing this now for how long?
The conclusion I came to that we have to separate from New South Wales was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Then, of course, we had the COVID restrictions, which really prevented any development of the project. It was really basically a fight for our own lives for that 3 years, and I don't mean against COVID, I mean against the restrictions and so forth that the various governments imposed on us. So it was put on hold for that 3-year period. So probably about the last 6 months, I and our group members have really upped the pace, I suppose you could say it. And what we... Can I explain, Wade, what we're up to? Or?
Yeah. So numbers and members and all that sort of thing, just quickly if we can touch base on that and give people an idea of where you're at, and if they may want to join up or something like that, to try and boost your numbers up and get this thing up and going. There's always an opportunity for those people to do that, Dave.
Yeah. Well, what I'll do, I'll just briefly explain from the top to the bottom, from the end result to where we are now. Now, the ultimate objective is to form a Riverina State. We have to separate ourselves politically from the green-orientated urban population of Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong, because the legislation that they are forming, such as the taking of the water out of the area. Now, before I go too far on that, Wade, of course, somebody may say, but that's actually federal legislation. It is federal legislation, but the federal legislation only operates with the consent of the state governments. The New South Wales state government can withdraw from the federal basin plan at any time, and so can the Victorian state government.
Yep.
So it is a state issue. Fundamentally, it's a state issue. So the legislation that's coming out at the state level is to take, at the federal level, via the permission that the state has given them, is to take irrigation water out of these areas. Now, these areas are irrigation areas.
Yep.
The water goes out of these areas, the wealth production, the food production, the dairy produce, the rice, the cotton, all these great things, the production is decimated, more than decimated, it would decline by 90%. Now, tied to that is a loss of farmer income and livelihoods, that's most obvious, but also the local economies, the local tradesmen the local mechanics, fuel suppliers, insurance, supermarkets, news agents, all these people that work in the agricultural supply industry, they all lose their jobs as well. Now, we don't want that, most obviously.
If you kill the cow or the golden goose, then it's over for everybody.
It goes through for everybody. You can go through any of these towns. You can go through Deniliquin, Finley, Warcool, where I'm from. We were at a protest today in Deniliquin, and regrettably, unfortunately, Warcool got a lot more mentions in that than what I like to hear, but it certainly did. All these towns are, in my opinion, and I don't like to say this, but they're stagnant or in decline. And a lot of that is tied to the lack of jobs, and that's caused by policies such as irrigation water. There are other ones as well, but we won't go into that. But what we found is it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how many protests or where we protest or what we say or what facts and figures get put to our members of parliament or who we even elect to parliament. The numbers in New South Wales and Victoria is the same. With that huge urban green population, the disaster rolls on. So it's politics, and we simply do not have the numbers to ensure our livelihoods and our prosperity.
So the situation is, from my experience, which has been decades, right, is that when you have the lefties in power, the Labor Party and the Greens, they wreak havoc. And then when you have the coalition, who are in opposition at the time, they inevitably say to you, "Oh look, I don't support this. You know, I don't have the numbers to do anything, but I won't support it." Okay, and then when they are in power, they support it. They just sign on the dotted line. Whatever they're told to do, they just do it.
Yep.
So therein lies the problem. We don't have politicians who are very, very few, I will say that, very few, who are honest and decent people. The vast majority of them will sell their grandmother out for 2 cents. That's just the nature of the beast. And so where it's up to the community to keep these politicians in line and in check, they're failing to do it. And we're getting shocking policies coming in and voted on, incredibly bad policies. So if you were to create the Riverina State, what kind of governance would you start to put in place, and how would you make sure that if you did that and you've got a governance happening, that you're not going to get just the same kind of corrupt, stinking people in there who are not working for you, they're working for foreign corporations? How do you cover that and keep that clean?
Yep. I'll come to that, Wade, but what I'll just say first is the process for state formation is, the end result is the formation of a state. Now, there's only one formal requirement for state formation, and that is the consent of the Parliament of the existing state. So all that we have to get is the consent of the New South Wales Parliament to form a Riverina State in New South Wales, the New South Wales section, and we need the consent of the Parliament of Victoria to have the Northern Victorian section, or whatever, part of Victoria, a part of the Riverina. We need the consent of the Victorian Parliament. So that's the ultimate goal, to get a state. The step before that is to get the consent of the Parliaments of New South Wales and Victoria for each section. The step before there, this is not a formal requirement, but in practice it is required, is a referendum. In practice we do have to have a referendum of the people in the proposed state on state formation. So we are aiming at a referendum of the people in the area of the proposed state, not Melbourne, not Sydney, not the population of the whole state, just in the proposed state.
Area, yes.
So we're aiming up to that referendum. Now that will carry. I've no doubt that will carry. Now, before that, we have to build up to that referendum, and where we are now and where I've been today is we are registering a party called the Riverina State Party, and we intend to stand candidates in the next federal election in the seat of Farrer, where we are, of course, and also Riverina, which is Wagga and that area there, and perhaps even Monaro, which is Tumut. I believe that's Tumut, those areas over there, and even Northern Victoria, Nichols, the seat of Nichols in Northern Victoria as well, because Northern Victoria has been shafted just as badly as we are. So we're in the process of registering that party. Now we need 1,500 members to register a party. That's the big thing. Now we're up around at the moment. We had a really good day today. I think there was 28 members joined today, and we're at around about 480 members. So, 450 members at the moment. But and we're building up to 1,500. Now, so that's where we're at the moment, Wade.
Yep.
Now, we will, when we stand those candidates in that election, now, that's a huge statement in itself that we've got a registered party. It means that 1,500 people have joined this party, so that's a massive statement.
Yep.
Now, each electorate has about 100,000 voters in each electorate. So when the election comes up, on the voting ballot, there'll be the regular Liberal, Labor and the Greens, and then also there'll be a party called the Riverina State Party, with a candidate there as well, in each electorate. So what will happen, we'll have a party with 1,500 members, which will be escalated up to that name on 100,000 ballots in every single electorate. So potentially, Farrer has 100,000 voters, Riverina has 100,000, Eden Monaro has 100,000, Nichols has 100,000. We could get the Riverina State on 400,000 voting ballots in the next federal election.
Yep.
Now that is massive. Now we will get a lot of people who will vote in support of that way.
Yes.
A lot of people.
Yep.
They'll say the Riverina State, they will say, yes, I support that.
Yep.
So it goes beyond just a discussion in Deniliquin or beyond even a membership of a party. We have a defined and certain record on the Australian Electoral Commission website that 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people voted for a Riverina State. So we're using it as like a mini referendum. We might get candidates elected to Parliament, we might not. Susan Ley and Farrer has the biggest margin in Australia. It's very unlikely that Susan Ley will not be elected next election. But even if we get 5, 10, 15,000 people who vote for the Riverina State, it leads us up, we will then leverage that up to a referendum, to justify a referendum, because there is defined and certain support for this principle. And I can assure you, Wade, and I can assure you listeners out there, or viewers, that there is a lot of support for a Riverina State. Absolutely. And now, as far as the prevention of corruption and so forth, Wade, the first thing that our policy is, I mean, and I can't dictate what a Riverina State will do. I can only present policies and so forth, and then it'll be at the referendum the people will vote on that. But our policy is the first thing we have to do to stop that urban concentration of population and politicians and domination, is to have area limits on electorates. Now at the moment we have electorates based on equal population, and they're spread throughout the state based on equal population. But what that has led to, or what it's at least allowed to happen, is a concentration of population and politicians in the urban areas. And once you get a certain scale of politicians up, they draw all the public money into their area, with the universities, hospitals and all, whatever.
Yep.
And so the urban areas get bigger and bigger in population, but the country areas, they're relatively the same, or they decline.
Yep.
So the first policy is to have area limits on electorates. And we have a very simple policy formula, is that no electorate is bigger than 10% in area of the state. No bigger than 10%. You can't have policies, electorates like Barwon in New South Wales. 46% of New South Wales is in one electorate. Barwon. Now that won't happen. So no electorates bigger than 10% of the area of the state. We have additional representation for every 10,000 voters. So every 10,000 voters, you get a member of Parliament on top of that. So
you've got one for your state, and then X amount for population.
The state's divided into areas no bigger than 10% of the state.
Yes.
And then you get additional, if you like say Albury or Wagga, and you've got a population of 40 or 50,000, well you get additional members of Parliament.
Yep.
One for every 10,000 voters.
Yep.
So the more populated areas do have more representation. But we put a limit on the concentration of politicians in that area with another formula, which is no more than 10 members of Parliament in 10% of the area of the state. So at the moment, New South Wales has 3/4 of its population politicians in 5% of the area of the state. In Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, it wouldn't even be 5% of the area of the state. They have 76% of the politicians, and that has caused a massive problem that we've got out here now.
Yep.
So we will have area limits on the size that they can get as far as big, but also limits on how many electorates you can put into a smaller area. And a simple formula is no more than 10 in 10% of the area of the state. Now people might say, gee, that's not democratic. But I'll point out to you that there is a precedent for that in the Australian Constitution, where in the Senate, every state, regardless of population, has 12 senators. Every state, Tasmania has 12 senators with a voting population of 500,000. New South Wales, with a voting population of 6 million, or 4 million, or whatever it is, probably 4.5 million, 12 senators. So there's already a precedent in Australian politics for area limits on politicians. So there's there's that. If anyone wants to say that's not democratic, well, the Riverina State will set up its own electoral system, and that's that type form of democracy. And the other point I want to make is the people in Wagga and Albury, for example, if they're in the Riverina, they would have over 10% of the population of the state, and they would be limited to no more than 10 members. Now, somebody there might say, gee, that's not fair. But if you look at New South Wales, Wagga and Albury have 2 members of Parliament out of the 93 members. So they've got 1.5, at the moment they've got 1.5% of the members of the New South Wales Parliament.
Yep.
Well, in this form that I've just stated, they'll go up immediately, they go up to 30% of the representation. They'll immediately go to 30%, which is massive, but they won't go beyond 30%. They can't get any more. So that's the first thing, Wade, is area limits on electorates, to make sure that we don't recreate the same problem that we've got in New South Wales and Victoria.
So, well, it looks as if you've put a lot of thought into this, David, right? And a lot of the ideas of how it would work structurally, and the mechanics of it. And, you know, it's very interesting to see what happened. I know a bloke around over at Shepparton tried to create his own state about probably 40 odd years ago. And that didn't work out too good. However, it sounds as if you might have done all your homework and this is a possible reality. So, you know, if that was to come along, that would be really quite amazing. And I think you might have a few others going, I think you would have a go at this yourself.
I can assure you, Wade, it's very popular. We all know, in these particularly these irrigation areas throughout the Riverina, we know that things are not satisfactory. We know that, and that's why this Riverina State proposal is so popular, because there's so many people know that where we are is not, we can't accept it, and it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So it's very popular, and there's already a history there, Wade. I'm not putting a new thing out there. There's already there's already historical sentiment for Riverina State. It's been there for 150 years already, and I'm just renewing it. But I believe I do have an advantage, Wade, in that I was a member of a political party for a number of years, and some of the problems that I recognised came from being in that political party, and I realised the things that were wrong, and they could not be corrected within that political party. So they could not be corrected within that party, and then I realised within the Parliament of New South Wales it can't be corrected. So I've just concluded, well, the system we've got at the moment where we are in New South Wales is a dead end. We're going to go off a cliff. It'll be so bad. So I realised that, and those problems I just put some thought in it. I thought, well, what do we do about it? We don't want to reproduce those problems. So we've got the area limits on electorates, and there's a few other things here as well, Wade, which I think it'll be really people will really be very pleased with. And another one is term limits on politicians. Term limits. You're only allowed in there for so long, and after that, you're not eligible to stand again. And the reason for that it is, and unfortunately, as you described politicians before, Wade, I don't disagree. The vast majority, I'm not a great fan of. But unfortunately, the political system and the people that, unfortunately, I sometimes think there's a flaw in human nature where the people that want to go into politics are probably the people that shouldn't be in politics.
Yeah, look, 100% agree. And the people who control them, they've got it so stitched up these days. They've got control of them with the money. If they want to have a career, they have to do what they're told and not what they know is right or wrong. And we discussed this a bit earlier with someone saying, you know, this is your truth and that's my truth. No, mate, there's only one truth, okay? And our politicians and bureaucrats they've left the reservation on that stuff. So that's where we've got these problems. So, but look, I really like to say what we've seen so far. A very, very big thank you for what you're doing, and a good thank you for having the opportunity to be here. We'll wrap it up now, and I think there's an opportunity a little bit down the track to sort of maybe do another section of that.
Yes, I'm very happy to.
You know what I mean?
Yep. We've got a website up, Wade. Yep. There's a lot of information on the website, and I'll give you the website address.
Absolutely.
All one word, theriverinaState.com.au. There's a lot of information on there, a lot more information than what Wade and I have discussed. There's also a contact form there if people want to contact me.
Yes.
Just send me an email. It's on the website. With our registration of the party, there's a membership form there. If people want to join via the website, they can. And I'll just give a bit of detail about membership, Wade.
Yeah, okay, just a couple of minutes.
Just a couple of seconds.
Yep.
We have two levels of membership. We have establishment membership. Now, establishment membership is free. There's no cost. So, and the idea behind the establishment membership is to get the 1,500 members. We just want them, and we don't want money to be a barrier to membership. If you want to be a member, just join. Now, and I'll also say that with membership, there is no liability with membership. There is no responsibility. There's no obligation. It's just join. We just want to get 1,500 members to get that party registered and then set the process in place as I described before.
Yep.
Now, we also have a general membership. General membership is $200 per annum, and general membership is to cater for the reality that this costs money. As simple as that.
Nothing's for free.
And my wallet ain't big enough to pay for all of it.
Yep.
But there's been some very, very generous donors. I will say that right now.
Yep.
Very generous, and a lot of committed people as well. So there's two. So like I say, there's the two styles of memberships, and both those memberships are valid. So it's just those two different styles.
Yep. Yep. All right, David. So, well, that's getting it out there. We'll put that on our Billboard Battalion. Hopefully get the message out more. Hopefully you do well with your, not only your numbers, but taking on the very corrupt and dishonest system. Taking on the people who control the information. And this is a big part of where it's at. So that's why democracy is failing.
Wade, look, I've got to say, I think corruption is an endemic part of politics. It may even be just part of human nature, and
in some cases it is.
And we've introduced term limits because, in my opinion, I don't think we can root corruption out.
No, you have to be able. And I must say, David, that you know a lot of people have said to me in the past, so who do we vote for if we want to get rid of these corrupt politicians? I say, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for. If you leave the system in place where they can exist and be corrupt, then that's what you're going to get. You have to make these people understand that if they go into politics or whatever, then there is going to be restrictions on how dishonest you can be.
And I think, Wade, that's we are proposing term limits on politicians because I've just seen things that I don't like and I think are really obviously bad, but they can't be. I don't think they can be stopped. So term limits, one. So area limits on electorates, and also term limits on political service. And those politicians, they won't have the opportunity to become exponentially corrupt over time because that time limit is set. And also the other thing is those politicians, when they leave Parliament, they will have to live in the world they created. They have to come back out and be employed back in that society they created.
All right, David. Well, we might just step back and give it another shot there of your sign. All good, Nick?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So this is David Landini in Deniliquin. We're talking on Billboard Battalion, and so together, once again, we can do what we need to do. We can fight this if we all stick together, and this is what we have to do. So congratulations. Well done.
Great to be here, Wade, and also I must say I support very much Billboard Battalion. I think your objectives and your aims and so forth, I agree entirely.
All right, good on you. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you, Wade.
Catch you later, mate.